Hello, my name is Glenn Lewis, and I'm a tech support rep here at AgriDry, and we're going to talk about winter settings. These are the topics we'll cover today. Since we're heading into winter, we'll talk about winter storage settings, drying while in winter, and correct settings for hotspotting. First, are you ready for storage? Check the average grain temperature. Make sure to deactivate sensors not in the grain. Typically, this time of year, a target temperature of 35 to 45 would be good. You just need to check the average grain temperature to see which one would work for you. If your average grain temperature is in the lower 50s to 40s, use 35. If the average grain temperature is in the higher 50s or above, use 45. Also, make sure that the air temperature you are expecting can support the average grain temperature. The controller suggested settings has been on each controller that's been shipped since June 2010. This chart is used to help customers know what settings should be changed. These are only suggestions, so if you want a different moisture or temperature, adjust those as you see fit. Let's take a closer look at the corn settings. Here you can see that there's an entire section for storage depending on the season you are in and the temperature you want to maintain. In this section for spring and summer, we only show what's changed. This helps you to see it really doesn't take a lot of setting changes to maintain your grain system. In the AgriDry Link and new Bullseye controllers, we now have wizards that will help you set the correct settings. The wizard will only work when you use it and doesn't change settings without you. The question we get every year, I have wet grain going into winter. Should I use storage settings and finish in the spring? The recommendation is to leave the Bullseye in drying mode. Not that winter mode wouldn't work, but we would rather set you up to use conditions to dry grain when possible. We will use the recommended settings or your settings based on your needs. If you decide to use heat, please remember that low temperature heaters don't warm the grain up. They are designed only to control humidity. Once the temperature outside stays lower than 32, turn the minimum air temperature to 35. Grain cannot release moisture if it's frozen. Make sure to use the hotspot controls and turn off any sensors not in the grain. How do you know which sensors are out of the grain? One method would be to simply pull a temperature cable chart. As you can see here, we have 3 sensors that are not behaving as if they are in the grain. I normally deselect sensors from the top down. On cables, number 1 and 7 would be at the bottom, so I'm going to click on 12 and 6, and you can see these lines start removing themselves. I also look at the line color. I know 11 isn't out of the grain, so I'm going to select 5 there. This is a great example of how to determine what sensors are in the grain. Make sure to deactivate these sensors either on AgriLink or the Bullseye itself. Let's go back and see the beginning. The simple fact is grain sensors don't move in temperature a lot. Grain is a very good insulator. Sensors that move up and down are simply out of the grain. As you can tell, the sensors at noon, here and here, are the highest, and at midnight it's the lowest. This leads me to method 2, watch your sensors. This method works for those without AgriLink. You can go to the controller and note the sensors at different times of the day. If you get a nice sunny day and your grain is cold, your headspace will warm up quickly. It is not the best method, but it can work with a little time and effort. Let's talk about hotspots. If you are storing dried grain, you have no reason to use hotspot controls. If you decide to use hotspotting, you must manage your sensors. You need to turn them off when they are uncovered and on when they become covered. A lot of times people will forget to turn the sensors off after they take a load out, or if they haven't realized there's been some shrink. Hotspot controls doesn't know the sensor is uncovered. It only knows that a sensor that was reading 35 is now reading 50. The controller will turn on. This leads me to the first setting of hotspotting, trip degrees. This is the amount of degrees a sensor has to increase before hotspot controls are triggered. Each sensor is monitored independently from one another. Sensor 1 is compared to sensor 1, and so on. Drop degrees tells the controller once the sensor has dropped 8 degrees, or in our example 42, turn the hotspot controls off, reset, and begin monitoring again. Hot timeout is the amount of time the controller will run without any drop in temperature, meaning if the temperature stays at 50 for an hour, the controller should reset the hotspot controls and begin monitoring again. Hotspotting is a very complex setting. Please use it with caution, as these settings do not care what the controller is set to. If the max air temp is 40 and the air temperature is 46, the controller will trigger a hotspot and the controller will turn on. As long as you manage your sensors, you should be fine. If you freeze your grain this winter, we don't recommend it. You can use the controller to get the grain back into temperature. It's really the safest way to do it, as the controller will make sure to use the correct temperature and moisture according to your settings to lower the risk to your grain. Just as winter storage, you need to make sure that the temperature outside can maintain the temperature inside. Every spring, I speak to a few customers who need to warm grain up, but the grain is freezing and the air temperature is 60. We set the controller to warm the grain up, but it takes longer because you only get an hour or two a night that the temperatures are even low enough to run. Maintaining a good and maintainable average grain temperature is key to maintaining good quality grain, no matter the season. So now I'll open up the lines for Q&A. Everybody will be muted, so if hit *6 to unmute yourself, I will answer questions now. Any questions whatsoever? It doesn't have to be about winter. If you have a question about AD-Link or controllers in general, I can answer those too. Okay. So thank you for joining our webinar. This will be reposted on our website for later review. If you have any questions, please give us a call at the office at 1-855-AgriDry, or you can see us online, or you can email us at support@AgriDry LLC. Thank you.